Shedeur, you told us that this week felt like you were getting back to normal, being a starting quarterback, like you have your whole career. But this is going to be your first NFL start. What does that opportunity feel like in this moment?
Feels good, but we cool, calm, collective like. This ain't nothing to us.
And what do you hope to show against this Raiders defense, your teammates, yourself, and these Browns fans with your play today?
I'm who they've been looking for. Appreciate it.
If you thought you'd seen it all, think again. Tonight isn't just another football story. It's a fallout, a betrayal, a name being dragged to the fire by the very quarterback they tried to silence. This is Spill News, where secrets explode before your eyes. Because the internet woke up to one headline and went insane, Shedeur Sanders didn't just speak, he exposed. Exposed the hate, exposed whispers, and exposed the one coach nobody thought he'd dare to name. They said he wasn't ready. They said he was overhyped. They said he should wait his turn. But according to Shedeur, he didn't just sit on the bench. He was put there, and now he's finally talking. Fans are split. Insiders are sweating. And one coach's silence is louder than any tweet. The internet couldn't believe it, and you won't either. Because what happens when the quarterback you doubted becomes the loudest voice in the room? What happens when the bench turns into battlefield? If you were in his position, same disrespect, same pressure, same betrayal, what would you do? Stay quiet or light the match? Let's break it all down. And trust me, it only gets uglier. It didn't start with a press conference, and it definitely didn't start with a headline. It started in a hallway, a quiet one, the kind of quiet where your own footsteps get loud enough to sound like questions you don't want to ask. Inside the Browns facility, Shedeur Sanders stood alone with his helmet in his hand, staring at a depth chart that wasn't supposed to look like that. Not after the grind he put in, not after the nights he slept with film still playing on his phone. Not after the offseason that nearly broke him mentally just trying to prove he belonged. At this point, he wasn't angry yet. He was confused. And confusion hurts more than rage ever could, because rage means you know who did it. Confusion means you're still stuck asking why. The message came casually that morning, the way life-changing news usually does when nobody wants to own it. A quiet tap on the shoulder from a staffer who couldn't even hold eye contact. Coach wants to see you. No warning, no tone shift, no sense of what was coming.
Crazy. It's amazing, you know, off of 1 week of practice, you know what I mean? This 1 week of practice. So imagine, you know, what a full offseason look like. It get dangerous. But it's just a 1 week of practice, so I'm just truly thankful, you know, that everything happened.
When Shedeur walked into Kevin Stefanski's office, it didn't feel like a conversation waiting to happen. It felt like a decision already signed, sealed, and delivered. And it came out short, dry, and clean. We're going in a different direction. No speech, no explanation, just a sentence that shuts doors without slamming them. Different direction is corporate language for not you. Football language for sit down. Life language for you didn't matter as much as you thought. Because here's the truth nobody teaches you about the bench. It doesn't just hold your body. It holds your reputation hostage. It turns questions into rumors and rumors into labels. And in Shedeur's case, the label started mutating fast. Publicly, it was framed as competition. Privately, it felt like quiet erasure. Meetings he used to attend suddenly moved. Plays he practiced suddenly disappeared from the script. Drill rotations would somehow forget he existed. It wasn't loud. It was surgical. And the quiet kind of mistreatment is the kind that leaves the deepest marks, because there's no moment to point at, just a slow realization that something is being taken from you 1 inch at a time. By the middle of camp, the air around him changed in ways you couldn't Google. Teammates still joke, but with their eyes. Coaches still smile, but without warmth. Music got lower when he walked into the locker room. Conversations ending mid-sentence like someone hit pause on the room itself. And then there were the whispers, the kind of whispers that float through an organization like invisible smoke. He's flashy. He doesn't fit the system. He's too confident. Funny how confidence only becomes a flaw when the wrong person has it. Funny how leadership is celebrated until it isn't obedient. Shedeur wasn't trying to run the building. He just refused to shrink inside it. That's when he started keeping receipts. Not screenshots for clout, not leaks for attention. Messages, conversations, voice notes from staffers who suddenly spoke carefully. Group chats that felt different after certain meetings. Little sentences that didn't mean much alone, but together started forming a pattern that was impossible to ignore. They told me not to run that route today. Coach had the script changed last minute. They don't want you throwing that deep. Patterns don't lie. People do. And then something slipped, not from him, but from someone who lost patience with keeping secrets for people who weren't honest. A screenshot made its way into the wrong phone. A message from a coach-only group chat. Blurry, cropped, but loud enough to shake the internet when it surfaced. Keep him limited. We don't want him getting too comfortable. Too comfortable doing what? His job? Another followed moments later. No reason to inflate expectations. Expectation inflation is just another way of saying hide the talent. And once those messages leaked, the internet did what it does best. It started digging.
So that's the mentality I went with going and prepping for this week. We know they got a dog on the D lineman. We know about Max Crosby. We know about that. But, I fear no man, The only thing I fear is God.
Blogs whispered first, then fans, then the armchair analysts. Threads exploded trying to decode everything from body language to play calling angles. Former players like posts and unliked them. Sports radio started asking questions without asking anything direct. And suddenly, a situation that used to feel invisible was now lit up like a crime scene. But not everyone liked the light. Some tried to spin it. Some tried to bury it. Some pretended it was normal. But it didn't feel normal. It felt engineered. That's when Shedeur decided he was done being patient. He stopped shrinking. He stopped soft-speaking. And behind the scenes, he started preparing for something bigger than football. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about the playbook. He was thinking about the narrative. Because in the NFL, if you don't tell your story, somebody else sells it for you. And they rarely make you the hero. Late nights turned into long phone calls. Conversations that started with off the record turned into memory bombs. Former insiders started talking differently. Suddenly, everyone had a story that never felt right. Everyone had something they didn't say before. It's funny how truth gets louder when you stop whispering it. And that's when something changed. Not on the field, in the room. The way teammates looked at him shifted from sympathy to belief. Not the weak kind, the dangerous kind. The kind that makes people realize you're not just waiting anymore. You're loading something. The silence around him broke. But not like glass, like thunder. Because whatever they thought sitting him would do, it didn't make him smaller. It made him sharper. And when the moment finally came, when his name was whispered behind closed doors again, this time it wasn't about holding him back. It was about realizing they might not be able to anymore. But what came next, even his enemies didn't expect. Once the story went public, it didn't explode. It leaked. Slowly. Quietly. Like gas in a closed room. It began with a late-night sports show where a host laughed and shrugged and said the one thing that sounded harmless and destructive at the same time. Maybe he's just not ready yet. That single line, clipped and reposted within minutes, spread faster than any press release could dream of. By morning, it wasn't just a joke anymore. It was a verdict. And nobody had bothered to ask the defendant if he had anything to say. Blogs jumped in next, armed with sources and empty confidence. One wrote about playbook struggles. Another hinted at attitude problems. Another whispered about ego. None of it had proof. All of it had impact. Comment sections turned into virtual courtrooms, where strangers who couldn't spell coverage schemes were suddenly diagnosing careers. Shedeur's name stopped being attached to potential and started being stapled to doubt. And the loudest voices in the room weren't inside the building. They were sitting behind screens pretending they were. Then something strange happened. The noise, which had been scattered and messy, suddenly became organized. The same phrases started appearing across different platforms. System fit. Long-term plan. Football decision. It felt rehearsed. Like somebody had handed the internet a script and told it when to say its lines. Every question was filtered through language that sounded professional enough to hide anything behind it. And through all of it, Shedeur stayed silent. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew silence sometimes builds a bigger stage than fighting ever could. That stage arrived on a night nobody saw coming. Not through a post, not through an interview, through a leak. A small file surfaced first, then a screenshot, then another. Training notes with names blurred. Staff communications written in a tone that didn't sound like development. It sounded like control. One message read, "Keep him limited. Don't expand his role." Expand his role? As if opportunity were an infection. Another said, "We need to manage expectations." A polite way of saying highlight the system, not the player. Fans started lining things up. The dates matched. The sudden disappearance of certain drills. The shortened reps. The moments where Shedeur looked ready on the field, but invisible on paper. The question began to circle every comment section like a drone. If he wasn't failing, why was he being faded? Then came the burner account. It didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It just posted one message that felt too calm to be fake. If he shines too bright, they lose control. That line hit harder than any stat ever could. Because suddenly, the story wasn't about performance. It was about power. Who gets the spotlight? Who decides when someone gets it? And who panics when the wrong player is about to take it? Shedeur finally spoke, not on camera, not at a podium, but in what was supposed to be a private message. And it didn't stay private long. "I wasn't bench for performance," the message read. "I was bench for perception." That one sentence turned the entire narrative sideways. For weeks, people had argued whether he was good enough. Now they were asking whether he'd ever been allowed to show it. The internet did what it always does when it senses blood. It dug. Old press conferences resurfaced. Interviews were replayed in slow motion. Fans analyzed facial expressions like detectives studying fingerprints. Was that hesitation? Was that discomfort? Was that a lie hiding behind a smile? Then somebody dropped an alleged audio clip. It was scratchy, hard to hear, but the words that escaped through the static were clear enough to cause damage. "Don't give him the spotlight yet." Yet, as if success had a scheduled release date. Then money entered the conversation. A football forum uncovered changes buried inside contract language. Performance incentives adjusted. Bonus structures shifted. A weird imbalance that suddenly didn't look accidental. One name seemed untouched by reward, while others were padded with protection. Fans started building charts, timelines, theories, and suddenly the question wasn't who started the rumor. It was who tried to bury the truth. The fan pages transformed overnight. No more highlight edits. No more celebration posts. They turned into research hubs, dumping screenshots, quotes, timestamps. The same question kept appearing in giant letters across countless graphics. Why didn't they want to win? And the louder became, the quieter the front office got. Then came the statement. Dry, cold, perfectly useless. We have full confidence in our coaching staff and players. No denial, no explanation, just confidence. And that silence spoke louder than anything else ever could. After that, the leaks didn't stop. They changed shape. A former equipment staffer told a tiny podcast that meetings around Shedeur always included the words limit and contain. A former intern claimed footage was edited when certain throws made him look too electric. No hard proof. Just too many stories sounding the same. The locker room shifted. Conversations ended faster. Smiles looked fake. Everyone knew something was wrong, but nobody wanted to be the one to say it out loud. And that's when Shedeur finally cracked the quiet without posting a single word. After practice, he turned to someone who trusted him and said one sentence that spread faster than any leak ever could. "They didn't put me on the bench. They put fear there." By that night, the phrase was everywhere. And then, without warning, the depth chart moved. No announcement, no reason given. His name climbed a single position, just enough to make people notice. Just enough to suggest somebody upstairs was nervous. You don't change paper unless you feel heat. And the building was starting to smell like smoke. At the center of it all stood one name, Kevin Stefanski. And it wasn't what he said that made headlines. It was what he didn't. Every question answered with nothing. Every conference decorated with silence. Every smile mechanical. When a man stops speaking, people start listening harder. Because when someone tries to mute a voice and fails, they don't get peace. They get an adversary. And at this point, it wasn't about depth charts anymore. It wasn't even about football. It was about control, losing its grip. And what happens next in stories like these is never quiet. When the story reached this point, it stopped being about football and started being about fractures, power, and survival. Inside the building, the air felt brittle, like one wrong word could shatter something forever. Shedeur walked through those hallways knowing he was being watched, not by cameras, but by a system trying to decide whether to correct a mistake or bury it deeper. Every meeting was colder, every handshake rehearsed, and the locker room that once felt alive now felt like a waiting room for bad news. The tone had changed, and nobody needed to say it out loud. Everyone felt it. The pressure followed him beyond the facility walls. It lived in his phone, in notifications, in message requests full of strangers pretending to know his life. Rumors multiplied faster than facts. Some painted him as a hero, standing alone. Others framed him as a problem that needed to be managed. And the internet, as always, chose noise over truth. But while the outside world tried to name him, Shedeur refused to become what they wanted. He didn't collapse. He hardened. He trained with a purpose that didn't exist before. Not just to play, but to survive. Extra film, extra reps, extra hours when nobody else stayed behind. His game grew sharper, quieter, more dangerous. The bench had taken a spotlight, but it couldn't steal his preparation. And deep down, the system began to sense something shifting. Then came the first sign that the building itself felt the heat. New faces appeared at practice. Not reporters, not scouts. People who didn't clap, didn't speak, and didn't wear team colors. They just watched, measured, noticed. Whispers followed. Words like consultants, review, and outside evaluation slid through the hallways. Meetings grew longer. Emails arrived later. Staff members spoke more carefully. The building was on alert. When the press conference finally came, it didn't feel routine. Journalists flooded the room, not with curiosity, but hunger. Everyone expected denial, a calm statement, a nothing answer. Instead, something unexpected happened. Emotion showed through. The head coach looked tired, not television tired, genuinely worn. When Shedeur's name came up, there was a pause that couldn't be hidden. Then came a sentence nobody expected. There were internal miscommunications. Some things should have been handled differently. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing. And in a system built on silence, that was an earthquake. By nightfall, things changed quietly. Depth charts shifted. Reps moved. Somebody somewhere started undoing something they never planned to admit. No celebration came with it. No public acknowledgement. Just a quiet acceptance that something had gone wrong. And fixing it without admitting guilt was the only move left on the board. Soon after, reports surfaced about staff being reassigned. Not fired, not blamed, just moved, like furniture during a storm. Nothing official tied it together. But anyone watching closely could see the pieces sliding into new places. Then the burner account reappeared one last time. Just one line. Paper can change, but memory doesn't. And then it vanished completely. No more drops. No more leaks. Just a warning left behind. Not long after, Shedeur got a phone call from someone who used to sit where decisions were made quietly and consequences were written gently. The voice didn't promise anything. It didn't threaten. It simply said, "Be patient. Truth moves slow, but it doesn't stop." And somehow, that was heavier than any guarantee. A few days later, an old video resurfaced from months before. Shedeur was younger, calmer, almost smiling. When asked about pressure, he had said, "I'm not scared of being benched. I'm scared of being forgotten. And that won't happen." The clip went viral overnight, not because it was loud, but because it was real. Then something changed in the tone of the world around him. Podcasts softened their language. Analysts started hesitating. Commentators shifted from accusations to questions, and the story that was once built to suffocate him now began to unravel. At the center of everything stood one heavy silence: the coach. Every press conference answered without saying anything. Every body movement calculated. Every word smaller than the last. And slowly, the system realized something dangerous. Silence had failed. Then came the rumor that truly rattled the air. Shedeur was working on something. Not a lawsuit, not a book deal. Something quieter, something more controlled. A journal, dates, names, conversations. A timeline not designed for revenge, but for truth. The rumor claimed it wouldn't come out all at once. It would arrive slowly, piece by piece, like a countdown nobody could stop. Then nothing. No posts, no interviews, no leaks. Weeks passed. In scandal time, that's a lifetime. And then one image appeared online. No caption, no context, just a locked notebook on a desk. And beneath it, a timestamp. Social media erupted. Fake? Threat? Announcement? Nobody knew, but everyone felt it. Shedeur never explained, because when someone stops explaining, it usually means they're done asking. After that, he disappeared from the narrative, not physically, not professionally, just from the noise. No interviews, no quotes, no responses, just presence. And sometimes, presence is louder than words. The building went back to normal, outside, but inside, something had changed forever. Because when a system nearly buries a voice and that voice refuses to die, it doesn't come back quiet. It comes back different, not louder, sharper, and somewhere not too far away. A story is still unfinished, the truth is still moving, and a quarterback who didn't disappear is simply waiting for the moment when silence speaks again. So now the question isn't whether Shedeur Sanders was wrong, misunderstood, or misjudged. The real question is much bigger than one quarterback, one coach, or one team. The real question is this: how many careers are quietly controlled before the public ever sees the truth? How many players are limited not by talent, but by timing, not by performance, but by permission? Tonight's story wasn't just about football. It was about power, about silence, about what happens when a system expects you to stay small and chooses the wrong person to suppress. Because Shedeur's story isn't just a storyline anymore. It's a warning sign for every young player who thinks greatness alone is enough. Sometimes you don't just have to be better than your competition. Sometimes you have to survive the system that doesn't want you to rise. And now it's your turn to speak. Do you think Shedeur was held back? Or do you think this was just business, as usual, dressed up like drama? Was it mismanagement or manipulation? Was it silence or strategy? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation isn't ending here. This isn't one of those stories you close and forget. This is one you argue about, one you debate, one you remember. And if you want to stay ahead of the chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what's coming next is even heavier. More names, more secrets, more stories that don't want to be told, but will be. And if you thought this was the end, think again, because the truth doesn't fade away quietly, it waits.